The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those knuckleheads of liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We are coming at you on November 1st, 2022. We are going to talk specifically about the death penalty today and a group that we have with us called Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. But before we get into that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our upper right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And on our lower left-hand corner today, we have our special guest, Demetrius Minor. He is a manager with the group Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. And so that's what we want to talk about today. You know, it's funny, a lot of times you associate conservatives with sort of like pro-death penalty and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, as libertarians, we definitely realize that, hey, the state makes mistakes. And so that's what we want to talk about today, and maybe reasons why we want to be a little bit concerned about the death penalty. So, Demetrius, you want to tell us a little bit about your organization and what it does?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you for the opportunity to come on your podcast. Looking forward to a very insightful and engaging conversation. Conservatives for the Death Penalty started roughly 10 or so years ago with a group of Republican lawmakers in the state of Montana who were raising awareness and concern about the use of the death penalty. And then it was formally launched at CPAC, which is the Conservative Political Action Conference, which is the largest gathering of conservatives within the nation. And from there was the launching of several state chapters, Florida, Georgia, Ohio, several Tennessee, and several other states. And what we have seen is a gradual progression in a shift that is turning, a shift that is occurring to where conservatives were understood to be pro-death penalty, but now we're seeing that many conservatives and libertarians are being opposed to the death penalty for an array of reasons, morally, fiscally, culturally, whatever that reason may be. They are starting to raise concern, awareness, and opposition. And so this movement is growing to this day.
So, Demetrius, could you tell us a little bit more about your moral objections to the death penalty? It seems, I know it's constitutional. There's no doubt about that. I know it's a state killing someone, but it is constitutional. Tell me a little bit about the moral objection to it.
So for me, I first came to oppose the death penalty maybe around 2010 or so. I was having a conversation with my pastor at that time, and I don't remember how the death penalty came up, but we was talking about the death penalty and being pro-life. And, you know, he made this statement. He says it's hard to be pro-life and simultaneously pro-death. And I always thought I was pro-life. I mean, you know, I was adopted, come from a family where my birth mother had 5 children. All 5 of us have different fathers. I know how easy it could have been for her to have chosen the alternative. And so I thought I knew what it meant to be pro-life, but in essence, all I was pro-birth. And so I began to do a more reevaluation of where I stood on the issues, and I found myself to be inconsistent with my pro-life stance. I couldn't even tell you why I was for the death penalty. I just felt like it was a default position, something to be expected of me as being a conservative. And it was at that moment where morally I became opposed to the death penalty. I looked throughout the scripture and saw where Jesus tells us, hey, listen, I know you're taught eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, but that's not the way that I want you to live your life. And that, scripture also says, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And I felt that the death penalty allows for mankind to play the role of judge, jury, and executioner. And that is something that is way above our pay grade. And I don't ever want to put myself in a position to where I think that I can play the role of the Almighty. So that's how I became morally opposed to the death penalty.
You know what strikes me about that right off? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, no, we can hear you.
Tim, yes.
I can hear you good, Tim.
Okay, yeah, the first thing that strikes me is that here he's struggling with inconsistencies in his philosophy. And so he's having a struggle, and he goes about addressing that struggle and tries to be consistent to utilize.
Who is he talking about?
Demetrius.
Oh.
and no, listen. The thing about it is we talk about that we use the H word around here, Demetrius, and we try to avoid it because we use it so much. The H word stands for hypocrisy, and we're using it in reference to how the left typically goes one way on one issue, and then the opposite way on when it's a Democrat that's doing the same thing, for example. So there's no search for consistency. There is no moral dilemma whatsoever with these things we consistently watch from the left of this that ends up being philosophical hypocrisy, of which they care nothing about because they have the philosophy of party. The whole, allegiance to party, tribe, and that kind of thing. So anyway, it's refreshing. It's just it's just a contrast between someone with philosophical morals, and then I guess the other people without. I don't know.
A big part of it is also being able to meet people where they are. Sometimes and I know you don't like to use the H word, hypocrisy, but it's kind of hard to talk politics without calling out how that type of behavior is exhibited on both sides of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
Many times, if we're having a conversation, a dialogue with someone, they may not be aware, they may not be educated on all the parameters around the subject. And so, therefore they take a position because it's what's expected out of them with the political philosophy that they hold. So it's incumbent upon us to meet people where they're at and to have that engaging dialogue to where they will see a revelation of why consistency matters. And when you meet people where they're at, you'll find that they'll come to their own conclusion for different reasons. But when it's all said and done, however they come to that conclusion, they're just an additional voice to your cause. So, for me, it was morally. But however, in conversations that I have with conservatives and especially with libertarians, the main reason for opposition to the death penalty is because of distrust of the state, because it's fiscally ineffective. And, that's something that I definitely resonate with. Listen, I don't trust the government to give me accurate COVID numbers. I don't trust the government to deliver my mail on time, especially now that the holidays are coming. I don't trust the government to effectively handle healthcare and just a plethora of issues. So why would I trust the government? And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here, but why would I trust the government with literally a matter of life and death? That's just a position that I'm not quite understanding.
Demetrius. I mean, I can see your point, and I can see your arguments. But at a philosophical level, the issue here we are really discussing is whether it is moral or moral to allow the state to kill. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what we're really talking about here. But in society, we do allow this. I mean, I don't think we even as liberty-minded people, we allow police officers to take life on the street. Okay, I'm not talking about the misconduct. I'm not talking about cases of misconduct. I'm talking about where police legitimately have to kill someone in the performance of their job and their duties to defend life, defend property, or defend his or her own life on the streets. So if we are saying we are against the death penalty, what do we do about police officers who have to at times use deadly force in the performance of their jobs?
So I definitely believe that there should be more accountability amongst police officers, and there definitely should be more transparency within police officers. And I think you're seeing an increased call for that. I think it's totally possible that you can be outraged about the outrage and the misconduct of police officers. I don't necessarily see both of those as the same. Police officers are, and I'm speaking generally here,
Yes.
are protecting, defending, while the death penalty is a rendering of punishment, which calls for the re-examining of our justice system as a whole. But I am totally for reforming police state to where there is more accountability, and to also for us to reimagine what justice looks like, so that our communities, our local communities, are more involved with crime prevention, violent prevention, so that there's not such a heavy burden on police to begin with.
Well, Demetrius, you mentioned something, you talked initially about getting into this because of your faith. And then,
right.
But I also like the fact that you discussed the idea of the libertarian perspective as well. And I mean, that's something that definitely echoes with me. I started out from a conservative family, so I sort of had some conservative views, and over time I became much more libertarian. But it was because of these issues of just noticing all of the mistakes that the state makes constantly, and a mistake at those levels. And
yeah.
And James, I wonder if you could pull up the graphic here real quick. I mean, we've seen some of the mistakes lately that the state makes in charging people with murder. I mean, there was this case up in New York recently with Jose Alba. We talked about it on our show before, but everybody saw this case on video. And yet the DA was willing to throw this guy for defending himself into Rikers Island and charge him with murder. And it was only a public outcry at the end that got him released. And imagine if there was no video here. I mean, this guy would still be sitting in Rikers Island, maybe up on murder charges. And I mean, we've seen other cases as well. And California Innocence and other innocence projects have highlighted so many cases out there where they've found people who have been falsely accused. And maybe it's just error, or maybe there's politics behind some of these as well, where for whatever reason, the person who's being charged just falls out of just political favor, I guess, with whatever the politics are at the time, and suddenly the state is coming down with the full weight of the state against these people, and carrying out huge injustices. So I think I guess for our audience, I just wanted to point that out, that my gosh, there's if you at all have any skepticism of the state, to give them the power to kill somebody and to have that certainty is just, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly glad
Jason,
you guys are addressing that.
Jason, you're absolutely right. Here's something that's very jarring. The death penalty is the only punishment that is irreversible. In other words, you can't be like, oops, we made a mistake, let's undo it. You can't undo it. You can't bring back that life. There's been over 150 exonerees, which means that's over 150 times that the justice system got it wrong. Mm-hmm. And for me, one time is one too many when we're talking about a matter of life and death. And so seeing that the state has gotten it wrong, people have been wrongly convicted, and given the racial bias history of the death penalty, for these reasons and more, this is a practice that I strongly believe that we should rid ourselves of, and that we should repeal the death penalty, abolish it. It's not something that needs to be used in modern times. The United States is one out of 3 industrialized nations that use the death penalty. The other 2, Japan and Singapore. And so on this particular issue here, we're definitely behind the 8 ball. But again, as we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, we are starting to see this shift take place, because it's going to be conservatives and those on the right. They're going to be vital to the repealing of the death penalty. And so the way I see it, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the death penalty will no longer be a practice that we can utilize.
Yeah, if I could go back on Leon's point regarding the police and self-defense, essentially the police are just with qualified immunity and a few other issues, are in the same boat as the average citizen, at least from a legal standpoint. Maybe it doesn't come out in actuality every time, and it doesn't. But the police are still required to meet the parameters of taking a life in self-defense or the defense of others. So, for example, they could, someone points a gun at them or rushes them with a knife in hand. They're going to be like any average citizen on the same playing field as the average citizen. And at that point, able to legally and morally and in every other way defend themselves against that attack with deadly force if necessary. Same thing as if I did it, if I was in that same situation. No different, except for, a few exceptions that I don't have time to go into. But the death penalty, on the other hand, there is no life at stake at this point. This is just a punishment. It is different from a self-defense shooting of any kind by anyone, in that the person being executed is not in any position to threaten anybody's life. They're imprisoned or what have you prior to their sentence being carried out. So I don't think you can, sorry, Leon, this is one time that I'm going to have to disagree with you. I don't think you can make the comparison. It's not apples to apples, it's apples to oranges.
I understand what you're saying, Tim, but your argument is an imminent danger argument, which, I can understand. But
sure, yeah, if you let the guy out, he's going to go kill again, and you're saving the future victims from this guy that's right now incapable of doing anything. But as soon as you let him out, or if which brings back the other alternative, if you're not going to kill the guy, and then you've got to keep him in prison because he's never, let's say he's the worst of the worst. He's a serial killer. He's a psychopath, and he's never, ever going to fit into society. He'll always want to murder again and again and again until he dies. That's a very rare situation, fortunately. Maybe not rare enough, but it is the only one that you could justify killing the guy. And then you have to do it with the thing in the back of your mind saying, Well, we're going to let him out. We have to let him out at one point or another, is what you're saying to yourself. Whether or not that's true is, or he can escape. We don't want to, you see what I'm saying? No.
Well, I can understand what you're saying in the area of perfect knowledge. Like, for instance, as a libertarian, I'm not coming at this necessarily from the religious perspective on this. I'm coming at it from the idea that the state makes mistakes, and the idea that most likely I'm going to be taking some guy's word for it, what this guy did, right? I'm not going to have actually seen every piece of evidence myself. I'm not going to have witnessed it all myself.
You wouldn't have been there.
Exactly. It's going to be just this collection of different disparate pieces of evidence that are all coming together to say this guy is a horrible person. But we know that the state makes all kinds of mistakes in these areas, and would you really want to trust them to get it right? That's what I'm kind of coming at.
And the Albers, the guy in New York, okay, well, I'll give you a different scenario. I defend myself against a home invasion with an AR-15 in San Diego, California. Well, guess what, folks? I'm going to be on trial, okay, for certain. Mainly not because I killed somebody, but because I killed him with an AR-15. Okay, that marks me in California as a no good son of a gun, literally.
Son of a gun.
So,
no pun intended, right?
No pun intended. And yes, and I am on the chopping block, and the justice system is broken in the United States of America and is politicized up the yin yang. So I'm in trouble. Okay. And that's, and if you have on the table the death penalty, this 70-year-old guy with the AR-15, me, would potentially be offed by the state of California, California, because I have an AR-15, and that's just a no-go.
Yeah. Well, certainly that's the politics that we're talking about, Tim, with all these different cases that we've seen lately, where it's all political prosecution in a lot of cases.
Correct.
So
but
that's just beyond mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, I do not have an AR-15, just to let everyone know. But if I did.
Well,
the secret is safe with us.
Yeah, well, yeah. We all know that I'm a shotgun guy, so there you go.
Well, Demetrius, a question I wanted to ask you is, as you've shifted your view on this, and you're conservative, and you've shifted your view toward being against the death penalty, have you seen that that's also made you shift other conservative views toward more liberty kind of oriented views, or is it just sort of in this one area with the death penalty?
The older I get, the more reflective I get. And I'm 3 years shy of turning 40. And I've come to this position. It's policy that's going to change people's lives for the better, not politics. So I'm in the business of promoting policy that's going to help us become a more safer nation, a more educated nation, and also a more civil nation. And so I'm not in the game or in the business of promoting politics or parties. And so I hope that answers your question. I'm always, my faith is the forefront of my life. So my faith is the definitive factor of who I am. But as an American citizen, I definitely want to be in a free and prosperous and thriving society. And so I'm of the thought process that a government that is small and limited is going to be the best contributor to that. And in this day and age that you and I live in, where politics is more partisan and more tribal than it's ever been before, I'm finding that those who are really for true liberty and freedom, and not for populism or following a cult of personality, we're actually in the minority. And but I do find it to be the most rewarding and the most fulfilling work that one can be engaged in, because again, I do believe that it has the most direct impact on people, families, and communities. And so I'm in the policy business, not in the politics business. And because of that, I'm always asking myself questions and making sure, again, that I'm consistent with my philosophical stances.
So your organization don't align itself with any political party, even though it sounds like it's on the right. Just its name, conservative, does not. You do not align yourself with either of the political parties.
Correct.
Okay.
We're not an extension of the Republican Party.
Got you.
Okay.
Fair enough.
In discussing policy, and we're getting near the end of the show, so I was just curious, what are some of the successes your organization has had? Maybe you could tell us about that. And if you wanted to leave us with any final thoughts, too, about your organization and what your guys' mission is.
Absolutely. Well, some of the successes recently was seeing the death penalty being repealed in the state of Virginia. And we're very close to seeing it also happen in the state of Ohio. And Utah, we just launched a state chapter in the deep red state of Oklahoma, where we're pretty optimistic that at the very least we can see a moratorium placed on the death penalty in the very near future. I would encourage people to follow our journey and to stay up to date with us on what we're doing, what we're offering, and some of the things that we're involved in. You can find us at conservativesconcern.org. Go ahead and click on that sign up button, enter your name and your email, your zip code, and very brief information so that you can be subscribed to our email list so that you're privy to the updates that we give of the things that we're involved in.
Well, awesome.
You can also find us on social media, Twitter, CCATDP, and then we have a Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty Facebook page as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much today for joining us, Demetrius, and sort of enlightening people on your journey and your group's mission about sort of, bringing a little skepticism and about some of these heavy-handed state policies and essentially policies where there's no walking it back, I guess, if you get it wrong. So thanks so much. And, like I said, you can check out Demetrius's group where he told you, and you can check us out in future shows as well. Thanks so much for joining us today. And until next time, stay free.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, everyone.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.